Okay, so good afternoon from the UK, from London, and welcome to the latest version of the Blue Thread webinar. Really good one today, something that's I think really important and pertinent to a lot of people. It's tapping into talent. So we're going to have a look with some really good guests into retaining and attracting talent, and the challenges and the different approaches as to how different companies go and actually go into sort of actually the real challenge actually is retention. I think attraction is less of a difficulty, but let's see where we get to. So first some quick housekeeping notes. If we can move the slide on. Yeah, okay, great. So please keep your I think all attendees microphones are automatically muted throughout the webinar, so just leave that alone. You can post questions, of course. And what we do is we generally tend to hold the questions till the Q&A at the end. So we have 3 presentations or conversations, and we're trying a slightly different format this time, where we're going to have some interesting conversation with our guests, and then ultimately we'll try and get through as many of the questions as we possibly can. But if you can just post them on the message box, that'd be really good. I can pick them up then, and we can ask the guests about them. So we're going to do basically today is sort of slightly to the left. We've been a bit more technical on some of our previous webinars, but one of the biggest challenges is, what are the talent challenges faced by the water industry? Let me just sort of frame this a little bit. In the UK, in the water sector, we have got access to so much talent, right? From people who are sort of more blue collar on the apprenticeship side of stuff, all the way through to people, you know, with PhDs. And I think when I joined the industry 30 years ago, it was predominantly engineers, civil engineers, chemical engineers, biologists, I guess, what have you. Now I think there's far broader talent that does come in, and I think the amount of work that needs to be done and the way it has to be aligned into sort of peripheral subjects like sustainability, like carbon zero, nutrient neutrality, ecology, etc., means that it's not really a field for engineers anymore. It's a field for lots of people. Now, when I went to listen to a presentation by the UK Water Minister last year, she said at that point, this was probably last November, she said that there was 60,000 vacancies in the UK water sector. Now, I thought that was a very high number, and I don't know where that number comes from, but there are thousands of vacancies. And for anybody who knows the water sector, certainly in the UK, the anticipation or the expectation is that we are going to have twice as big a capital programme from 25 to 30 as we had from 20 to 25. So the obvious question is, where are all these people going to come from? And I think we have had a lot of people who are coming to retirement, and 50% of the professionals in the water sector will be retiring before 2030 in the UK. So how do we retain that? How do we learn from them? How do we store that knowledge? And how do we understand those skills gaps? So obviously there's a big push now with data, AI, that perhaps are skills that are lesser common, or were probably not the traditional engineering skills or scientific skills. And I think they need to be brought in. These people need to be given very good careers, interesting careers. And I think we need to get much more flexible around retention of staff beyond that 3 to 5 year period where people come in, they're enthusiastic, and for whatever reason it doesn't work out and they drift out of the industry, because quite often once they drift away, they don't come back. So I think overall, the conversation today is going to be driven by 3 different angles I want to start with. So maybe we can start off, you know, can we talk about can we move on to the next slide, please? So we have got 3 really interesting speakers here, and I'm going to introduce them one by one, and then we'll all get together at the end for a bit of a chat. But Kerry is the managing director of WaterTrain. WaterTrain is a training organisation that has been leading provider of apprenticeships and qualification programs to the UK water utility sector since 2007. We're also then going to go over to the States to speak to Robert, and Robert is Director of Innovation at DC Water, which is District of Columbia Water, is Washington, DC. Really, really interesting thinking there about culture. And then move on to Sarah. Sarah Mugford is probably well known to a lot of people on this call, who's Divisional Director of the Environmental Planning Division, RSK, but also is very, very keen on promoting and helping STEM students come through and having STEM careers. So we'll try and take those three conversations together. Maybe we can start by maybe asking Kerry to join me here. So on the screen. So Kerry, hi. Hiya. So just a quick introduction. I gave you, I said you're the MD of WaterTrain, and you have been with WaterTrain for what, 12 years, I think, something like that. And in that time, I think you've helped hundreds of apprentices start their career in the water industry. And I know you're particularly passionate about the value of water and the impact both to the company but also to the individual. And I think lifelong learning as well is something that's really, really interesting. So for me, I hope you're going to help us. You're going to share your thoughts around the importance of linking training to staff retention and career progression opportunities. And basically, I'd like to try and expand a little bit on this. How does an apprenticeship ultimately lead to lifelong learning? So, over to you.
Thanks. Thank you for the introduction and for the invite to be part of today's discussion. As you said, it's something quite close to our hearts at WaterTrain and how we can support individuals and organisations with excellent training and how the impact that has within the business. So I know one of the points we're discussing today is around staff retention, and there's some slightly different approaches to that. So the first thing is attracting new people into the organisation and how you retain them within the business, and how you retain your existing staff. Maybe some staff that have got slightly disengaged with the industry, with the politics of large organisations, and what can be put in place to reignite their initial passion for the water industry and effectively make them feel empowered and valued and want to stay. Realistically, training programs need to be successful and to have that benefit, and they need to do that, need to be supported by all levels within the business. So that engagement from the individual that wants to do the training, from the line manager, and actually as an organisation on what they are wanting to achieve in their own people development as well, and demonstrating from the business from a larger perspective that they have got that investment and drive to develop their people, and that's a huge thing. So with new recruits, as we mentioned, there's apprenticeship routes and other routes within to the business, and I'll touch on that in a moment. For existing staff, it's how you can target where their skills development and training needs to be, and making things really bespoke to that individual and filling in skills gaps within the organisation. So it allows employees to improve, but it's tailored, it maximises learning outcomes and reduces unnecessary retraining, unnecessary time out of the business. So as a benefit for both individual and organisation, and giving the individuals the opportunity to shape what that looks like as well. So it's not just a manager.
Is that part of the staff feeling valued type of things? So
yeah,
they're part of the training. They sort of almost not quite define their own training, but they're very much a part of developing their own training.
Yeah, developing their own training plan. You know, I think if organisations have got a very strong appraisals process or personal development process in place that allows individuals to feed into what they want from their career, from their job role, their clear progression routes through the organisation, how can that be supported? What training can we put in place to help that happen? Absolutely, it's for people to feel empowered. It's no good really managers saying you need to do this training X, Y, and Z. Because people are going to go into that a little bit disengaged, unenthusiastic, and then the trainer might turn that around and they leave that training program invigorated, but you're not starting that in the right place. And I think that's a big thing around the buy-in from the whole organisation.
And is that different for different levels of entrance? So, you know, people come in as apprentices, for instance, maybe straight from school, or people who come in as graduates with a bit more sort of life, you know, they've been to university or whatever. And I guess Are we good in the water sector looking after our people when they come in first?
I think from a new entrance into the business, yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of organisations have a very clear career progression scheme, have a very clear training plan. So we're an external training provider, so we work with organisations, but they will have internally what an investment into that individual and into that role. And I think there's a little bit of a disparity for existing employees, potentially, especially in operational roles that have been there a number of years. How do they feel valued in their role? They've been doing the same thing day in, day out, and actually potentially beginning to feel a little bit disenfranchised. And if someone's saying, oh, actually, you need to go on this training course to improve what you're doing, but I've been doing this role for 5 years, and how that is managed, I think, is slightly different. I think as a new apprentice, absolutely. I don't know if you're aware, it's National Apprenticeship Week earlier this month.
I wasn't.
At the beginning of February. And a number of the large water companies, or utility companies, but I appreciate this specifically water, used it to announce their commitment to apprenticeships over the next financial year, and a number of those through into the next AMP period. And that's huge. Off the back of that, one of the companies has got 50 vacancies that went live this month, and within a week had over 600 applicants for that. So they've done a really good job locally in that area to promote themselves as a business, what their apprenticeship programs look like, how those individuals can progress, and what their training plan will look like. And as I said, it's a huge, in 1 week since that's gone live, huge level of applicants.
So would you say, so from that, I know that's just one example you said, but 50 jobs, 600 applications. So really, we're not having a problem in attracting talent, right? We're not having that issue. So therefore, is the problem more retention beyond that sort of initial sort of burst of enthusiasm?
Yeah, so I think when I'm talking about apprentices, those people that are coming into those roles have no prior technical experience or operational experience. It's a new industry to them in the main. So the employers, so the utility companies in this sense, they've got to put a very strong internal training process in place, and they invest very heavily on developing their apprenticeships. They expect high retention rates because of the upfront investment that they're putting in to train those staff. So no, I wouldn't say that there's an issue necessarily at an entry level being able to recruit. I think the difficulties from recruitment come when you're looking for skilled individuals.
And those challenges then, Kerry, the challenges that companies face, because ultimately an investment is an investment. It costs money. So budget cuts obviously links to various investment cycles. The water sector at times in the UK is notorious for being either boom or bust, feast or famine, whatever way you want to put it. And now, of course, we're facing into this sort of big need for lots of people, and that can change very quickly. So what are the challenges companies face in sort of being able to bring these people in, absorb these people, and then present them into their company as valuable employees as soon as possible, I guess, really?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, historically, we've seen training needs in line with sort of AMP cycles. So at different point in the cycle, it'll increase and then decrease again. And the budgets need to be actually redistributed internally rather than focusing on training and people. It needs to be on assets, for example, improving leakage targets and things like that. So that is a big challenge. There's a big commitment from a number of organisations through the next AMP period to recruit more people. A number of apprentices have been built into those AMP8 commitments. So I think there's a realisation again that there needs to be that financial injection into training. Again, with the introduction of the apprenticeship levy, it cut a lot of training budgets. So a number of organisations had the training for mandatory training, and anything else they were trying to utilise the levy as much as possible. So it's been difficult for those existing staff that maybe need some more bespoke training. Where's that budget coming from? So we're hoping to see through the next AMP period that budget there is available now to be able to put some more of those specific bespoke training programs in place and help retain those more skilled staff. It's another a problem, but something that impacts the industry's headcount, aging workforce. And we've seen some companies now start to use, they're called apprenticeship training academies. They recruit the apprentices on behalf of an organisation, and so in this sense they don't count as headcount. So it's given some of the larger water companies the opportunity to be able to recruit apprentices and train them up and utilise them, but they don't then need to be part of headcount until they're fully competent at the end of the programme. So we've seen that pick up a little bit in the last year or so as a way that companies can still attract those apprentices and have a budget for it and not come out of headcount, which is interesting.
So in terms of the lifelong learning, then, Kerry, you know, the problem is we throw a lot of money at people early on in their careers. They do their apprenticeships, they get their job, they get competent, and it's not just about it. And then there's a temptation to just ignore them, leave them, get on with it. And you mentioned aging workforce that isn't highly motivated, leave, right? Okay. So is there things that you would recommend companies do? Is there different approaches to keeping that energy in the job? Because it's got to be more than a salary, right? Okay, it's got to be a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be a going salary for a job role, won't there? So you might move from one company to another for an extra few £100, but actually it's more around feeling empowered and feeling valued. And I know Robert's going to touch on that a little bit more in his section, and his experiences in Washington on that. But as an individual, if you don't look forward to going to work on a Monday morning, you might start looking somewhere else to work. And that's it. Putting in those, so having a really strong PDR process, really strong relationships with your line managers, operational teams, making people feel valued, they have a voice within the team, how they can improve things, and appreciating your staff. And that doesn't necessarily mean financial. There's lots of different ways that you can look to do that, but it's being supportive, making people feel valued, and a development piece. That is huge, because if someone doesn't, especially younger people, if they don't see that there is that progression route, they will look somewhere else for that. You work for a number of years, so to want to go to work on a Monday morning is really important. And when staff start to feel disengaged, they start to look somewhere else. Absolutely.
So you've done my job for me there, really, Kerry. You've given me a segue into Robert. So thanks. It was really good. So maybe Robert could join us now, actually, on the screen. And thanks, Kerry. We'll come back, actually.
Thank you very much.
I know you're staying with us. So Robert, hello, good afternoon. I thought I would be speaking to you from Washington, but you're actually in London, aren't you? You are in London.
That is correct. Yes, it's good. It's great to be here, Mark.
Good. Well, you didn't bring the weather with you. Maybe you did. I don't know, but it's terrible here in London today. So anyway, look, enough. Robert, thank you very much for joining us. And Robert is the Director of Innovation at the District of Columbia Water and Sewer Authority, commonly known, I think, as DC Water in the US. Robert, you're also Professional Innovation Strategy at Cornell University, and I know you've got some other academic interests as well. And I was looking through, some of your LinkedIn and what have you, and you have had a wide and varied career. Not a lot of it actually interesting in the water sector, but you've had senior roles in government, airline business. You worked with Deloitte, Citigroup. So we won't be rude and ask you how many years you've been active. And you're obviously talking to somebody at the door now, so that's good.
I'm just going to see what's the floor. I've got to leave the floor now, so okay. Becky is going to come and find you.
Okay.
You just stand up here.
Sorry about that, Mark. I'm at a utility right now using their conference room. So, anyways,
perfect timing.
Right, so
perfect timing.
Right.
Perfect timing, Robert.
Right.
So, what I'll do is I'll say, look, there's two things you've said to me that it stands out really, that across your career, no matter what sector it's in, two things that stand out is innovation and people. And I think both of those really obviously are very connected, and they're what drives you. So maybe we could start off this chat about how employee engagement is key to strengthening the underlying culture as a means to retention. Kerry talked a lot about attraction. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the importance of culture to retention.
Yes, so I am the innovation director, which means that I depend on people, okay, to care enough to raise their hand and raise their voice. And, culture, we all have different definitions of culture, but it really comes down to the basics of how you think, your attitude, okay? And if it's positive, it's your good behavior, okay? If it's negative, it's bad behavior, okay? And it's so important that people feel like they matter to the organization. I'm not just a number, but I matter, okay? I fulfill a very important role. I belong here, okay? This is just a job. I belong here. And most importantly, I'm proud of where I work, who I work with, and what I do, okay? If you can have the mattering, belonging, and feeling proud, you've got some really good energy there to get something from people. And as the innovation is nothing more than solving problems, right? And I need great ideas. I need people, I need employees on the line, direct, not the higher echelons, but the people who do the work, the real heroes in your organization. And I need them to feel positive enough, okay, to be able to say, Robert, I have an idea, or there's a problem that needs to be solved, okay? That's what we're looking for. And I need them to feel safe enough, okay, to raise their hand and say what needs to be said. And I need that they need to be encouraged as well. And this is where middle management plays a very important role in helping us to strengthen the culture, strengthen the ability to innovate by encouraging their staff to think about, challenge that status quo, how we always do things, and help us come up with better ways. Carrie talked a lot of good points she raised, but one of them is to be able to acknowledge people and reward people, thank people. A thank you doesn't cost anything, but it means so much to people, okay? And if you do more than just a thank you, that's even better. But we need to make people feel comfortable and know that leadership needs them. And for many, it's the first time they've ever been asked for an idea, okay? We need to have a bottom up. Yeah.
You've mentioned something that's really interesting there. You talked about a safe zone for ideas. Okay, so somewhere that people aren't afraid to stick their hand up. Now that's got to be more than the boss saying my door is always open. Okay, because everybody says that. All right.
Yeah.
So how do you go about that in asking employees for ideas to address known problems? Is that a formal process, or is that something that everybody does every day? How do you see that happening?
Well, we need to get beyond lip service. You're right. My door is always open. I need, action speaks louder than doors open. Okay. So it really is, it's a communication plan. It's about trust here. And I can just say what I do, but there's others that do things differently, but I get in front of people. I appeal to them. I ask them for their help. Okay. I use examples where someone does help me. I publicly recognize them, okay? To be able to recognize someone and put them on a pedestal and say, listen, Jim here came up with an idea that's helped us save millions of pounds, okay? Why not give him the recognition? Why not give him a nice bonus? Why not give him a trip to a conference to speak at? Actions speak louder than words, and I think we need to be able to do that continually, not once, but sustain that ability to not only say the words, but also act in a way that people believe and they can trust in leadership.
So in your experience then, Robert, I think all of that is very, very interesting. I think actions speak louder than words, absolutely.
Yeah.
Your current position in DC Water obviously is a large utility on the east coast of the US, but you've also worked for some big airline companies and what have you. What's your feeling? Are we good at this in the water sector? Are we not? Are we worse than anybody else? Are we just middle of the road like you'd expect maybe?
Well, I don't mean to speak for each utility is a little bit different.
Of course, I understand that. Yeah.
What's different for me with the water utility, which I have not been accustomed to, is that at DC Water we do have organized groups. We have unions, and we work well with the unions, and I believe in unions. But I got a lot of blue collar workers, which is new for me. Okay, I came before DC Water came from IBM. It was the other extreme. It was all white collar. Okay, So it's a different message, and especially for some of the workers that come every day, and the crews that go out and work on pipes and clean out sewers. For many of them, it's just a job. They come to work, they get their assignments with their buddies, their crews. They go out, do the work, and come back. That's challenging. It really is. But we still make a real effort, because those to me are the heroes. They're the ones that are directly involved in the problems that we're trying to solve. So I need to convince them. I need to appeal to them. And if I can dangle a couple of football tickets, for the best idea, whatever it takes, I need to be able to make them feel comfortable enough. Again, it's about making them feel that they matter, that they belong at the utility, and that they're proud of what they do. Okay, and that leadership appreciates that and wants to help the organization as well.
So does DC Water then put effort into training the leaders as well, training the managers? Because sometimes you can have the best employees in the world who are utterly demotivated by a middle manager who perhaps has got other issues going on in his life. So how do you? Is there any specific things that DC Water are doing to increase employee engagement and to sort of make employees feel valued?
Yeah, I have to say that I'm not trying to brag about DC Water. I mean, it's helping everyone understand what this organization does, but we do a lot of good things. We at least once, if not twice a year, we have a leadership retreat. Okay, we spend 2.5 days together. And when I say leadership, I don't mean the VPs and above. I mean all the way down to the foreman, all the way down to people, managers who have staff working for them. Okay, leadership goes all the way down. Okay, and there must be a couple hundred of us. That's a large group. And what I like about that is that we cross different silos. It's a good network. So we go from knowing each other from emails and from Zoom and team calls to actually, shaking hands, talking, having a beverage, having dinner together. But we collaborate a lot. So that's one thing that we do is to get together, and then we have great messages that we want to instill. Our values, our strategic plan, what we're trying to do, and culture comes up every time. We talk about culture and our people and what we can do to strengthen that culture.
So one of the killers of good culture is cynicism, right? Okay, I've and when you work for an airline, I'm part of getting that thing up in the air. When you work for IBM, it's AI, it's all very interesting. When you work for the utility, the temptation is you do sewage, you work at the sewage plant. It's not big and sexy. Now I can say that because I've worked in sewage for 30 years, right? Okay, so how do you keep that? How do you make some? I think you used at the start, proud to go to work, and I'm proud of my guys, proud of my colleagues, the other fellows in my work. How do you keep that going, Robert? Because it's not an obvious one,
No, it's not. I'll tell you a brief story. So we have in terms of recruitment, we have a summer internship program and at local universities, and these are the Gen Zs. These are the younger people who care about the environment much more than us old baby boomers. Okay. And I talk about the environment. I talk about sewage. I talk about how to minimize CSL outflows into the river, what we're doing to be responsible on providing our customers, society, with clean, dependable, safe drinking water, and responsible treatment of the wastewater and return it back into its element. I think for the younger people that really resonates. This is a very, very purposeful job. Now for the older workforce who have been doing this for 20, 30 years, that's a different message, okay? And I still, what does it take to make them feel proud? And for some of them, it's working with the younger people and instilling that into the younger people as well. But this is the most purposeful job I've ever had. I've worked for-profit companies, but this is exactly about, we're doing some amazing things in our sector, okay? We're cleaner than ever before, looking at renewable energy and how we can maybe reuse water so it has another life besides just once, the reuse, for example. But I can go on and on, but this industry is changing so much right now, and with the technology. I've got a group of about 50 people who are really engaged. It's a community of practice. We're experimenting and learning about ChatGPT, generative AI, and it's about empowering our people with a new tool that they're just amazed with. And so I'm trusting them to be able to work with us and be able to show that that adds value and be a change agent to see if we can get some new technology like that. So it depends on the person, their age, and what their interests are, but we want to pull them together in some type of purposeful way to feel proud of what they do.
It's really interesting you use the word trust there, actually, because I think trust and respect, I think quite often, you know, Kerry was talking about started careers and people come in and they're enthusiastic and what have you. And yes, people do get tired through careers, so you got to regenerate that, you got to keep that energy going, you got to, you know, and I think, you know, the enthusiasm that you speak about the industry is the enthusiasm I felt for the industry. But quite often, as I say, we got to guards, particularly in the you know, the cynicism, I think is a bit of a difficulty. But before we go on, because I think we started running over a little bit, is I'd like to bring in Sarah at this point, actually, and maybe Robert, you can join us in a minute as well, because Sarah is actually coming at it from somebody who's outside the sector for most of her career. So maybe Sarah, you could join us here. Okay, hi Sarah. So just brief introduction. You probably, a lot of people know Sarah anyway. She's the director at RSK Group. She spent many years, I won't say how many, Sarah, majority of your career at RSK, and currently she runs the environment and planning division of RSK, which really interesting. When I looked at it, I didn't realize there was 24 separate companies covering subjects from ecology, archaeology, services, property advice, communication, then even infrastructure design and construction. And it's right across the whole world, isn't it? So you got people in the UK, you got people in Australia, you got people in Europe. So these companies, I think, really must give you a really interesting overview into the talent, I think, and the different approaches culturally that Robert was talking about. The other thing, of course, is you're a STEM ambassador and encouraging young people, and I presume young women particularly, to not do the STEM subjects, but enjoy and embrace a STEM career and engineering career. Now, I spent a lot of my career in the water sector, and we really never saw ourselves as part of the environment sector, which really just sounds ridiculous. Okay, it does. Even when I say it, you know, it just sounds ridiculous. Okay, and yet I know the environmental sector industry is also suffering from a similar skill shortage. So what can we learn from each other? You know, what are your experiences, Sarah, and perhaps other parallels, other things you could draw as well? Yes.
I think you're right, and I was interested in your statistic as we opened the conversation this afternoon, because I should say hi first. Actually, hi, hello, Mark. Thank you for inviting me.
Hello.
Forgot that bit, but what I was actually going to say was the environment analyst statistics around the skills gap in our sectors, around 480,000 jobs, I think, needed by 2030. I'm not sure how that relates to the water sector, because I don't know whether we're a parallel industry or whether we're connected. I mean, I have to say, from a practical perspective, I suggest we're connected, but in terms of those statistics, I'm not sure. And I think from our point of view in the sector, we're seeing green jobs. This terminology of green jobs is everywhere. There are roles where previously we'd never seen them. The transition to net zero and green technologies and all of that, of what that brings, is resulting in careers and opportunities that we never saw before. And I think in some respects those opportunities are almost invisible to the people coming into the workplace. You know, the traditional careers of the past are quite visible. People know and have heard of them. But, you know, what is a heat pump technician? What is an environmental consultant? And trying to engage with the skills base out there and get people thinking about those opportunities while they're still thinking about their careers, I think is really important. I mean, I understand that in all careers, and I LinkedIn did a survey, I think that 1 in 5 jobs advertised now will be affected by the energy transition. So you know, we're going to.
I mean, that's really interesting, because I've also heard a statistic that 30% of all jobs today did not exist 10 years ago. Okay,
Yeah.
so just did not exist. So I think, therefore, I think that brings the subject really around to the whole STEM thing, isn't it? Right. So
Yeah.
whatever the job is, you need science, engineering, maths. You need those core skills, and I know that's something you're quite passionate about yourself. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the Green Careers Initiative, the IEMA stuff, and what have you that you're involved in.
Yeah, I mean, probably most people know about STEM and the initiative that comes from that, and being a STEM ambassador. But it's about, you know, giving professionals their time in engaging with schools, colleges, universities to bring careers alive, bring those subjects alive, to encourage people to stay with them into a career. And yeah, I am really passionate about doing that, and seeing those careers brought to life, and we have some fantastic ambassadors within RSK. I think the initiative that we've gone into with IEMA is really about again, making careers and the green career opportunities more visible. We've done that. IEMA have created a Green Careers Hub, which a number of other businesses have gone into in collaboration with IEMA, and RSK is one of them. We've created videos around different career opportunities. We've asked different people, so there was a career changer, working mum, somebody who came in through year in industry, sort of traditional graduate route, and talked about the different opportunities that might exist, whether it's site-based work, whether it's home working, that flexibility, to actually really bring it to life. I think the generation of people coming through now love a video. So being able to sort of, in a quick soundbite, we haven't quite gone as far as TikTok, but something that they can pick up really quickly and engage with, and actually kind of touch and feel the opportunity that is there, is really important. And it can highlight actually that, you know, you don't necessarily have to come from a traditional degree into the industry. There are lots of other routes that exist. The opportunity for all.
I mean, when I joined the water sector, a lot of people were engineers. I'm an engineer. A lot of people were engineers. A lot of us were men. A lot of us were white. And I think when I used to be at WRC, you know, we used to be very proud of the fact we had 40% female at WRC. And I know in RSK, there's a very, very good representation sort of diversity across the sector, but it's something we have to keep working at, isn't there? I mean, you've just talked about not the traditional route through of, you know, school, A levels, degree, etc. How do you have any thoughts about how we bring, you know, people from minority backgrounds, you know, ex-military veterans, women, of course, obviously, what have you, and how do we keep them? Because my feeling through this whole conversation is attraction is okay, it's retention we're probably not as good at. I don't know, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts?
I think that's true. We've recently been doing some work around, you know, churn in our business is to a certain extent inevitable for all businesses, but actually you're only running to stay still if you can't keep a cap on that, and you're never gonna have the new entrant. So it's definitely important, and accessing people who are in those underrepresented parts of the skills base. I mean, at RSK we're doing some things like partnering with universities which have a greater diversity in their base. So we're doing quite a lot of work with places like the University of Greenwich. And then once you've got people within the organisation, I think I mean, there are many of the things that Kerry and Robert said. Actually, they've got to feel pride. They've got to feel that they're part of a community where they feel at home, and that's hugely important, because if you don't feel comfortable in your work environment, then the chances of you staying longer term are pretty slim, I think.
And do you think the pandemic has sort of caused us issues as well? I mean, within RSK, obviously your company, you know, environmental consulting, people are out in the field, right? But you also have people who are sort of in front of the computer, and I think it's quite possible nowadays to actually have a job in a big company and never really meet anybody physically, right? And what do you do in your division to sort of make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, I mean, there is the great resignation, isn't it? That people came off the back of COVID and took a little look at their lives and decided they weren't quite happy with the balance that they had. But I think, you know, what is really of a concern to me is that we will see a challenge in 5 or 10 years' time with new entrants into the business who perhaps technically have got their skills, but they haven't sat next to colleagues. They haven't felt that community. They haven't done that kind of osmosis learning that you get from being in an office environment, you know, understanding not just the technical aspects, but the commercial aspects of being a consultant and what that looks like. And so actually the opportunity to work from home is you know, the fridge, the washing machine, the kids, the dog, they're all closer, aren't they? It's easier. I don't know why I put fridge first. But I think actually encouraging people to come into our offices is essential. And we've started to really focus on collaborative spaces where we bring different businesses together. I think that harnesses innovation. I think it harnesses that community and interaction. It has benefits for our clients because I think we collaborate better. And so I think there are huge benefits. So we need to make sure our office spaces are engaging, happy. You know, it's not just a fruit bowl. It's about having a personality and
that's the respect, isn't it? And that's the culture that Robert was talking about. But
yeah.
I mean, without being rude, you've stayed a long time in RSK, right? You've done many jobs. I can say the same thing myself. But
career, I was thinking.
I mean, what made you stay when maybe the job wasn't as interesting, maybe things at home were a bit tougher? You know, what are the things from your own personal experience, without prying too deeply, you know, that you feel is important, that the company has to be almost there for you when you're ready to reach out? You know, I don't know, maybe you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Because as a mother as well, of course. So.
Yeah, I think there are a few things, and I picked up on a couple of words that Robert and Kerry used. I mean, that trust and respect thing is really important. I think supporting our staff through the ups and the downs of life are tricky. And I am a mother of two children who have created challenges, let's say, and RSK has been incredibly supportive through that when I've needed time away from the business. So I think supporting people not only in their work life but in their home life means that you get their commitment. I think having open communication and engagement throughout all levels of a business is really important. You know, giving people a safe space not only to innovate, as Robert picked up, but also to fail, if that is not such a radical thing to say. But you know, we all learn through our mistakes, don't we? And you need to feel comfortable to make mistakes, and opportunities to develop in areas where you have knowledge and skills and passion. I think RSK is absolutely brilliant at that, actually, and there are hundreds of examples across the group where we've given people the opportunity to fly. And I think for me that's been no exception. I came in with a slightly different skill set and was given opportunity to grow that and develop that within the business. Yeah, I have stayed a long time.
What about? I mean, you've worked in Australia and you've worked in the UK, and they're two very different cultures, aren't they?
They are. They speak the same language, or mostly.
Well, they speak the same English, so same words maybe. A bit like Robert, you know, different cultures separated by the same language. But anyway, I mean, is it very, very different over there? Or if we were having somebody in Australia here, would they be saying the same thing? Trust, respect, room to fail, you know, all these things?
I think, interestingly, I think the words would be the same, but actually the environment in which you do that is slightly different, and the expectation I mean, they work hard, they work really hard, but their workplaces are culturally a bit different to ours, and it's the sort of it's difficult to actually put that into a descriptive language, but there's a different feel. It's a little bit more informal, I think, in many respects. I think and their kind of engagement with each other is a little bit different. Surprisingly so, actually. I expected more commonality. I think understanding that kind of that informality is important. I mean, I'm sure I'm sure there are as many things in common as there are differences, but I think it's probably informality is the kind of piece that I would pick up on most.
It's interesting though, because you as the senior person are having to learn.
Yeah.
It's as much as they are having to learn as the people who are, you know, working with you. And I think that's something that perhaps in my experience is that a lot of the onus on the change was put on the junior, when actually what you're saying there is it's really important for the company to be able to facilitate change through its business processes, but also through its managers, through its senior people like yourself.
Yeah, and I think actually one of the things that I found quite interesting is that, you know, they are a long way away, and they don't particularly want POMs coming to tell them how to do stuff in Australia. And I think that is an important recognition, is that actually rocking up and telling them what to do doesn't really cut the mustard. You got to listen. You got to listen to the way they do things, and then facilitate what we need as a business, as a global business, in that working environment. And I think actually listening is a hugely important skill, whatever level of an organisation you sit at.
Yeah, and I suspect that those skills are ones that Robert will recognise from, you know, some of the like IBM and, you know, and some of the airlines he's worked with as well. But I think maybe Robert and Kerry could join us for the last 10 minutes, I think. And thanks very much, Sarah. So we have quite a few questions actually come in. So I don't know, I'm not in charge of the cameras here. So
yeah.
Great. Well, maybe I can ask Kerry a question first. And then I think I'll like Sarah and Robert to comment on the second question.
Okay.
So one of them is about the UK's, and this is specific UK, so the water AMP cycle of investment boom, which we're at now, and then job squeeze because money runs out. Have you noticed that, you know, in your time as having a big impact on retention? And when the squeeze comes on, do all these nice words, trust, respect, safe spaces, culture, do they all just get thrown out the door for budgets?
Ooh, that's a tricky question. We certainly see a huge dip in investment of people in training through the bust part of that cycle. Absolutely. There's always a drive for apprenticeships. A lot of companies will take an intake every year, but in other training, we definitely see a dip around that cuts. And you know, we've seen organisations go through redundancies and other bits and pieces as well throughout those cycles. So from a very top level, yeah, there is that. There is that impact. Budgets are cut, and it's how do companies manage those cuts, isn't it? I think.
Which I guess really is a good question for Sarah and Robert. Really is, you know, before redundancy programs, usually there's a cut in training, there's a cut in recruitment, etc., etc. How do we ensure, or you know, maybe not ensure, because obviously companies have to look after themselves, but how do we keep that contract with each employee's valid through the downtimes? Maybe Robert, you have thoughts about that. You're muted.
Would you like to comment while we me to comment while we
maybe
unmute?
Sarah, you could comment.
I'm in. Oh, can you hear me now? Yeah, I was muted by the organizer, so it's good to be back. What was the question again, Mark? I'm so sorry.
No, the question really was, Robert, about, you know, Kerry was talking about that when times get hard, quite often, you know, training gets cut, and I always think that when you join a company, you have a contract of employment, but you also have a contract of sort of that trust and respect. How have you seen companies react to that so that they can maintain that with trust and respect even when times are hard?
You know, I think people leave not because of the organization as much as who their boss is. You can work for a great organization, have a terrible boss, and you're going to leave, right? So I think that link between the employee and their immediate boss is critical. And if you're having a difficult time at work, if you become somewhat cynical, that's where you sit down and talk to your boss, because nothing's perfect. We have to kind of look through and make sense of some of these frustrations and look at the bigger picture. And that's what the boss can do. And if it's about career development, the boss can help that person advance their career, get training, whatever it is. But the boss is there to make the employee be successful. And I think if that understanding isn't present, it's very, very difficult. So that's how I answer that. Is it's an immediate boss. Yep.
Sarah, would you? I guess you'd echo that, wouldn't you? Really, to be honest.
I think from my point of view, you've got to take your employees on a journey with you, and if they're on the journey and they understand to a greater or lesser extent the challenges you face as a business, then generally speaking they understand when the pinch points come. I mean, that's not a universal understanding, obviously, but I think, you know, a really acute version of that for me was the COVID, our response to COVID. We didn't go down massively, but we did have to all pull together to actually weather that storm. And for me, it's taking everybody on the journey.
Okay. And I guess really, Kerry, something else that people are asking about is the ROI on training programs. How do companies measure that, or do companies measure that in relation to staff retention and career progression? Obviously, there's a lot more than training, right? I get that, right? But ultimately, companies like ROIs, right? So what's my return on investment in Mark or in whoever?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of our clients will look at their apprentices. I'm speaking purely from apprentices in our business at the moment. We'll look at the retention rates of their apprentices 12 months, 24 months on from completion of that training program, and the average rate of that around between 85 and 90% retention. So that is pretty high for apprentices, especially when you're new into industry, not sure whether it's for you, you've gone through that process, to still then be retained into the business for 2 years later.
Yeah, okay. And I guess something that's always sort of interested me is, you know, we get great people come into the industry, and this is, you know, just not just water, but the environmental sector. And they come in and they're sort of enthused, they're newly qualified, they're almost activists in a lot of places. And then you sort of come in and they're full of beans, train them, what have you. And then around years 3, 4, 5, something happens. Either they haven't got the promotion, or they don't like their boss, or whatever. And I've always felt we're not very good at managing that. And when I say we, I'm not talking about RSK, I'm talking about, you know, big companies, the sector, and what have you. You know, how do we keep that energy? How do we keep that activism throughout the career? Maybe Sarah, you could just talk about that a little bit.
You've got to keep things quite fresh for people, and I mean, you know, not every day is going to be an exciting, engaging, amazing day. You know, work is work, but I think keeping people interested with new opportunities, showing them that actually progression isn't necessarily up and down, it can be lateral as well, provides quite a lot of, certainly for me and within the RSK Group, that opportunity to see a variety of different experiences, whether that's geography, sector, skills, can really help with engagement at that sort of critical time in people's career.
Yeah, and I guess, Robert, you would echo that too, because I think you talked a lot about sort of non-financial reward, or just saying well done, or just keeping that engagement, that conversation going at all levels. Yeah,
I agree. You know, it's we have our ups and downs, you know, and it's we got to look at where we're going and how this is a good journey. But I think the training and the opportunities, and not be stuck in what is perceived as a dead end job, is important to realize, and to listen to the employees and what they want to do, and give them the opportunities to actually do some things. So I think the manager has a lot of power and a lot of influence in making sure that people remain generally positive and forward-looking.
So in terms of that, then, if you are at the bottom of the, you know, if you're at the coal face, okay, so let's say you know, it's really important that you're not just perceived, or you don't perceive yourself as your job not being important, right? This is something that Unipart did very, very well, right? Okay, so even if you're just packing some nuts and bolts or something, you're part of getting that Land Rover going. That was the whole message of the Unipart way. I don't, Kerry, do you see that transparency going all the way through the water sector, or do you think we can do a lot more about that? So the guys cleaning the weirs in the sewage works, it's not the most amazing job, but is really important for the quality of the water that's going in the river, right? So how do we go about that? Are we good at that?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of onus and importance put on the operational roles within the utility companies. You know, those. I think that where the training happens, it is in those roles, because they've kind of, when one of those sort of bust moments, cut it all and then realise that where it needs the injection and investment again. So I do believe there is absolutely a value in those roles, and those roles, I mean, some individual staff may not agree with this, obviously, but that they are valued from the organisation, absolutely. It's difficult in the utility companies and operational. You're not likely to jump ship. You know, if you work on a water treatment process plant for South West Water, for example, unless you're relocating to another part of the country, you can't necessarily do that same job locally somewhere else for someone else. So it's a little bit different in those more operational roles within the water utility companies, because it's a relocation to get a new job, potentially doing the same thing.
And I guess in the environmental consulting side of stuff, or in the environmental contracting side of stuff, Sarah, it's more or less the same, isn't it? But I think you've got to have people knowing that what they're doing is important, and it's not just, well, nobody cares if I don't turn up for work on Monday. You know, it's building those links, isn't it, into the wider culture of the organisation.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think one of the things that we talk about our RSK family all the time, but I think making people feel part of a community is really important. And actually, I think we have lots of family units under the wider umbrella, and I think recognising that those might have slightly different cultures, but that is a culture that's really important to them. And, you know, and that goes down to, you know, even an individual team and the closeness of a team. And, you know, I would echo what Robert said about leadership. You know, it's an obvious thing really, but actually making sure that you do have leaders that are passionate and care and are interested in and invested in the happiness in its broadest terms of their employees is really important.
Okay. Right, we've come to an end, actually. That's been really good, actually. I was sort of thinking, you know, that I looked at it and suddenly think, right, we're done. And I've just got an email to say, stop, Mark, please finish this. We need to finish up. So I just want to say thank you so much to Kerry and to Sarah and to Robert, and you know, all of you for taking such time out of your day. Robert, yourself, it's manful. You know, you come all the way over here from Washington, and you end up, I think, in Thames Water, and you're in a room. You've managed to blag a room to be able to do a webinar and share your thoughts with us. So very, very thank you very much to everyone, and we leave it at that. So thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.